Hello, I'm going to be presenting the work that we've been carrying out using threat landscapes as a tool for use in preventive conservation. Threat landscapes were originally developed in cybersecurity to help to identify, qualify and contrast threats which institutions might face. Individual threats in this scheme are given an impact rating and a vulnerability rating, with vulnerability relating to the potential to exposure to a certain threat. This allows particular threats to be compared and also plotted graphically in a way which makes them easier to interpret. The nature of this tool means it can be adopted usefully as a technique to be used in preventive conservation, as I will demonstrate in the following slides. It enables threats or problems to be considered holistically, allowing situations to be regarded as a whole and thus preventing excessive or unbalanced focus to be given to any individual aspect. This means it can be used to provide a functional overview, to encourage dialogue between stakeholders, and to usefully inform decisions on collection care strategies, investment, renovation, maintenance and development as part of a broader risk management approach. To use this approach, the first thing that needs to be done is to identify the range of threats which will be considered. We started off by using the 10 Agents of Deterioration, as these are well known within the preventive conservation field, and we decided that we were going to look purely at collection storage issues within the library. However, we realised that the 10 agents taken as was didn't necessarily reflect the full scope and detail of the issues that we were facing, so we subdivided many of these threats, giving us a total of 25 individual threats, as is indicated in the table on this slide. We also created a crib sheet to explain how these individual threats would be considered, determined and assessed, and the example shown on this slide is for the two subdivisions of physical forces that we decided upon: damage from unsuitable physical storage and damage from retrieval or transport methods. We also had to decide how we were going to apply this across the library sites and buildings. The British Library is based across two sites, one at St Pancras in London and one at Boston Spa in Yorkshire, and we ended up subdividing these two sites into a variety of buildings and areas, giving us 30 possible locations as indicated in the tables below. We then had to think about assigning impact and vulnerability ratings to each of the threats for each of the locations. To do so, we had to think about a variety of different issues, and in terms of impact, we considered these ratings on the basis of the severity of the issue, how many items would be affected by the issue, how significant the items that might be affected would be, how sensitive the items were to the issue or the problem, and would the problem be likely to affect items for prolonged periods before it would be discovered. In terms of vulnerability, we looked at the likelihood of a particular problem or issue occurring, the number of different ways in which that problem could manifest itself, the extent to which there are existing mitigations already in place which would deal with the problem, and how resistant the local collection items are in a particular area to the initial onset of the effects. So really, how quickly would things be likely to go wrong? Having defined the threats we're considering, the locations we're looking at, the way we are specifically and individually defining those threats, and the way we're considering the ratings of impact and vulnerability, which were individually assessed on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the least problematic, 10 being the most problematic. We then assessed each of these threats for each of the locations, as indicated in the table below. If you think about this, you will realise this represents assigning a total of 1,500 numbers across the range of threats and locations we were considering, which might seem a very onerous, very time-consuming task, but in fact we achieved it with about 6 hours of work, so roughly a day's worth of work, which, given that this provides an assessment for the entirety of the institution across 2 sites and a number of different locations, you can see this is actually a very quick way and a very easy way of assessing these problems, providing the people carrying out the assessment are very familiar with the building, with the locations, with the nature of the collections, and with any potential issues or problems that might be encountered. Once these numbers have been generated, it's then possible to plot the data in a variety of different ways to graphically represent the results of the assessment. Perhaps the easiest way of doing this is to look at the full range of threats in a particular location. So here we have examples of the results for a bespoke storage area within the library, and also the same results plotted for an older building. And as you can see, this provides us with our landscape. It gives us an indication of the broad range of threats and problems that we are likely to encounter in a particular location, and enables in broad brush ways for those locations to be compared with one another, highlighting those which are potentially most problematic. We can also consider a particular threat and look at which particular locations or regions of the institution are most vulnerable to that particular threat. So here we're looking at, for example, rain ingress on the left or exposure to excessive light levels on the right. So this enables us to get a better idea of which particular areas or locations within the library are going to present the greatest risk for a particular type of threat. We can average the ratings of the threats within particular locations and then plot these against each other to gain an overall feel for the quality or suitability of the different locations. And if we look at the nature of these locations, we can then see that, as perhaps might be expected, our modern storage performs very well, our old buildings less well, and our operational areas, where collection items are stored and used, but other activities need to take place, fall somewhere between the two. We can also create average ratings for individual threats to look at how these threats are represented across the library as a whole, and this, for example, shows that within the particular areas that we're considering within this piece of work, dissociation we would regard as our greatest individual threat. Hopefully, some of the benefits of using this technique will have become apparent through the previous slides, but to give an overview in broad terms of the benefits that we've realised arises from using this technique. In general terms, it gives an overview of potential threats and their distribution, and this enables us to help to predict likely problems and plan usefully for the future, especially in terms of investment or development work. It also provides a record by which it's possible to track improvements which have been made through anything like investment or policy changes, and helps to highlight flaws in any underlying assumptions that we might have about the nature or suitability of collection areas. And this is through achieving a minimisation of unconscious bias and ensuring that investment strategies are strongly evidence-based. It allows a good comparison between dissimilar areas, and this does assume that there is a similar weighting between the different threats, but this was one of the things that we tried to achieve by the subdivision of the 10 Agents of Deterioration. It highlights the way in which storage buildings and storage capacity have a strong influence on preventive conservation issues, and it's very easily accessible to non-specialists. Partly through its visual representation, partly through the way in which we can describe and explain threats to people. By doing this, we encourage buy-in by enabling people to engage in the process, and we ensure that all stakeholders appreciate the factors which may lead to collection risks, and this ensures that we have a good appreciation and usage of this information when we're carrying out anything like development or investment work. And finally, it fits well within our existing risk management procedures. In conclusion, hopefully I've demonstrated that threat landscapes are a useful collection care tool which is focused on preventive conservation concerns, quick to carry out and readily accessible to a wide range of stakeholders. The results can inform decision-making on the use, maintenance and development of facilities, and can help to guide investment strategies, as well as providing a means by which the success of these strategies can be judged.